instinctively I want to be like,
cool motive, still murder.
hello ladies, gents, and non-binary mates, and welcome back to Beauty in the Bookcase, where we take a book and we make a look. Now, before we get started, make sure you follow me on all of my social media so you know what I'm getting up to when I'm not on YouTube, and yeah, when I'm gonna upload next, because I'm super great at consistency. So today's book, I'm Not a Serial Killer, was written by Dan Wells. So he was born and raised in Salt Lake City, Utah. And, you know, from a young age, Dan Wells had a passion for writing and for books in general. And he actually used to write little choose your own adventure style books when he was young. And so because he had started so early, by the age of 22, he'd already written his first like serious novel. And I'm Not a Serial Killer is actually his debut novel, and it, you know, went on to become a series, which I didn't know because I'm pretty sure I bought this book when like Borders still existed, which ages me. So Dan Wells has a variety of interests, ranging from like video games and tabletop games. I'm going to link his YouTube below because he does do kind of reviews on that type of stuff if you're interested. But he also has a big interest in psychology, which does play a part in this book. He said that when he started writing a book with the main character who has like sociopathy, he really wanted to research it well, and he kind of wanted to stay away from that stereotype that just because somebody has a personality disorder, or in this specific case if somebody has sociopathy, that they, you know, are, you know, going to be evil, horrible people, because it's not true. So that was something that really stood out to me when I was reading up, because I think he has another character, I think in a different series, that has schizophrenia, and he also kind of wanted to kind of work against destigmatizing those disorders, which is pretty cool to me, somebody who is very interested in mental health and kind of destigmatizing and talking about it. So yeah, so I think a lot of us can relate to, I guess, having an interest in true crime. You know, there's documentaries and bajillion videos on YouTube and podcasts, and I think it's become kind of a mainstream interest nowadays. But while a lot of us are interested in it for, I hate using the word entertainment because obviously like it's true crime, terrible things happen to people, so not entertainment, but you know, I think a lot of us kind of become fascinated by it because, you know, it's not something that we can easily comprehend, right? Like I think you can understand being really angry at a person, but you can't understand reaching that point, especially when it comes to like serial killers, you know. Like for Wayne Cleaver, who's our main character, he actually is interested in reading up about serial killers because it helps him to develop this like guidebook. You know that show, Ned's Declassified School Survival Guide, if you ever saw that, where, you know, it's like tips on how to survive high school. Well, basically reading up on serial killers is John's survival guide to not becoming a serial killer. So he starts to pick up on, you know, traits, things that connect them, or, you know, just patterns to look out for, and they help him to develop this very strict code of conduct to keep him from kind of going to the dark side, so to speak. So this includes things like he doesn't allow himself to think too much about one person, which then also means he doesn't really allow himself to have very profound relationships and friendships with people because they can become obsessions. He also doesn't allow himself to visit like crime scenes. So like if something happened, like let's say like if there was a car crash nearby, he, you know, doesn't allow himself to go visit like the site, because obviously like if you're trying to fight the urge to not be a violent person, you should probably not be like around violence because it might awaken something in you. And the last of, and another one of these rules is that whenever he gets really upset with somebody and he wants to kill them, he instead like compliments them to kind of push away those negative thoughts. despite his condition, and I think despite what we often see where it's kind of this almost predestined expectation that if you have a personality disorder or if you know you have sociopathy, you'll become a killer, John is actually pretty in control because of his rules. Granted, he also has learned not only to like mask certain desires or, you know, pretend that he can feel empathy and, you know, those types of things that he doesn't genuinely experience. There is an issue, which is that a serial killer comes to town. And so then John is stuck in this position, this like awkward position where he starts to consider whether it's worth it to let what he deems the monster out in order to, you know, protect the town and his loved ones. He's kind of stuck in this kind of paradox or this dichotomy of, is he gonna, you know, become John Wayne the hero, or is he gonna be John Wayne Gacy the serial killer? We can all kind of relate to the idea of wanting to some extent or other have some control over how people perceive us, right? We want to, you know, it's things like the way we dress, the way we talk, the way we approach certain situations that help us kind of develop a persona, so to speak, or develop who we are as a person. And whether consciously or subconsciously, I think a lot of us do have a set of rules or like a code that we live by. And you know, it's not necessarily as strict as John's, you know, it's not kind of like, you know, you spend your whole day kind of going like, right, I can't go to this, I can't talk to this person, I can't do that, I have to do this if I feel the urge to do this. But you know, whether it's shaped by culture or your family, religion, whatever, I think a lot of us do have certain ideas of what's wrong and what's right, you know, and that's kind of the thing we live by, right? We're like, well, you know, it's not okay to hurt people, it's not okay to shoplift, it's not okay to lie. You know, we all have certain codes that either consciously or subconsciously we kind of live by in order to be good people. But, you know, like I said, a lot of these things are just kind of naturally ingrained in our brain, right? They're things that we don't actively think about. We don't have to usually think about saying thank you to somebody who holds the door open for us, or, you know, consoling our friend after they've lost a loved one or something like that. However, this is kind of a very active struggle for John. So while I already mentioned the fact that he has these like rules that he lives by, there is a whole other aspect to the lengths John will go to control things. So a lot of it then for John is based on controlling his actions and the way that people perceive him. So, you know, this is often expressed in him kind of, as I mentioned earlier, being able to fake empathy or sympathy when, you know, something sad happens or something bad happens. It also comes through when he is, you know, he feels kind of bad for not being able to stop himself from, you know, talking about like serial killers and disturbing things that obviously upset the people around him. And it also comes forth in his relationships and, you know, the fact that he carefully curates what he shares with his mom and with his therapist to ensure that they don't, you know, they don't become concerned or, you know, kind of freak out when he says something crazy. And, you know, this all kind of comes to a head when John forgoes his rules, right? Because those rules were quite often like the barrier, you know, they were what was helping him know how to, you know, fake the emotion that he needed to fake in the moment, or kind of told him like, hey dude, maybe you've spent a little too long reading about serial killers or talking about like disturbing details or something, you know? So then when he kind of breaks these rules apart and he can't really stop, it starts to have a really big impact on his control. And I think another big sign of this struggle for control is the fact that John very much considers the, you know, those kind of murderous tendencies inside of him to be almost like another person, you know? For him, he always refers to those thoughts and those tendencies as the monster. So that helps him to kind of think of it as a force outside of himself. And I think that also helps him to control it, right? So if it's a monster, he can just kind of put it away, right? He has this idea of it's this actual creature inside of me, and I can control when he comes out, or make sure that he doesn't if I don't want him to. But of course, the second he kind of forgoes these rules, it makes it a lot harder to make that distinction, right? And to feel, I guess, safe again. Another big theme, and you know, I think it's a theme that comes up super often in films and in books, is the whole idea of, you know, good versus evil. But in this case, I think it has a really different and unique approach to it, because we have a character who, you know, probably in a, you know, in most settings, he would be considered the villain, but he's our hero, right? So that kind of starts to complicate things, especially because the big dilemma of the story is whether it's justifiable to let out the monster and kill the serial killer in order to protect the town and save his loved ones. So then we have this issue about good versus evil, and kind of like the morality of doing a bad thing, but, you know, for a good result, right? Do the ends justify the means? Because, you know, in a more traditional, I guess, setting, we have very black and white heroes and villains. You know, our heroes would never kill another person unless they had no other choice, unless, you know, killing one person meant saving a billion, right? It's like that trolley problem. And then on the other side of the coin, we have the traditional villain who kills for sport, you know? They don't see anything wrong with it. They have their specific agenda, and they don't think that it's wrong to hurt people if it gets them to whatever they're trying to achieve. So the question of this book is really asking is, if somebody kills a bad guy, does that make them a bad guy, or is it okay? And instinctively, I want to be like,
cool motive, still murder.
However, when you really think about it and when you read on, I would say the lines start to blur a little bit. And it definitely puts the reader in an uncomfortable position, because you kind of start seeing like, well, yes, killing is a bad thing, but then what's the alternative? Now, let's unpack that a little bit. So let's take, for example, superhero movies. Now, in superhero movies, there's always a lot of destruction. And quite frankly, as much as we'd like to pretend that, you know, those buildings that crumbled were empty, or those cars that got squished were also, you know, vacated, the truth of the matter is, or the likelihood is, that there was some sort of collateral damage from these hero fights. And that means that, unfortunately, our heroes are indeed killing innocent people. However, of course, if they didn't do these certain things, then they wouldn't be able to save the day. So again, we go back to, is killing some people to save more people good or bad? And morally, I want to say no, of course not. But then the more you think about it, question then shifts to, is there a way for these characters to save the day and save other people where there are no victims? Now, in terms of the real world, if I'm generally looking at something like war, and we're discussing, you know, the whole concept of collateral, I usually get pretty upset about it, because at the end of the day, if you just go like, well, whatever, it's collateral, you're kind of dismissing the fact that, you know, those are real people who lost their lives, and that is pretty icky. However, when it comes to fiction, I am a little bit more lenient on those notions. So let's be a hypocrite and say that, whatever, let's accept collateral. But here's the thing. I think that the reason why I was a little bit more willing to accept it in this case is because the circumstances are quite unique. So, in a perfect world, what happens is that John finds out who the serial killer is, he calls the police takes care of it. Hip hip hooray, guy goes to trial, hopefully, you know, he goes to jail, justice is served. However, John tried that, and it did not go well. So when John initially catches the killer, he calls the police. But when the police show up, what happens is that they are killed. So then John has a bit of a, you know, another pickle to deal with, which is, if I call the police again, this is just going to keep happening, right? So more people are going to die if I keep calling the police. But if I kill the killer, then hip hip hooray, killer's dead. Sure, I killed a person, but then I also stopped a bunch of other people from getting murdered. So what do you do with that? When you try to do the right thing, but it results in more deaths, is it morally correct for John to kill the killer? So the truth is that I don't know what the answer is. You know, I don't know if I can, with a clear conscience, say, yeah, it's okay to kill one person to save other lives. But, I mean, I think the fact that we're presented with this dilemma over and over and over again really helps to humanize John, right? We're not just seeing a guy who instinctively goes like, there's a serial killer on the loose, I'll kill him, that's the solution, the end. We see somebody who has set up these rules and is trying really hard to follow them, and is trying very hard to stand by, you know, his moral ground and stand by his beliefs and his desire to do and be good. And it's not until he kind of realizes this is the only option, this is the only way out, that he, you know, goes through with the plan. And even then he still kind of struggles to, you know, commit and just go ahead and do it. And I think this really helped me connect with him as a character, especially because it wasn't just kind of like, oh, okay, honky-dory, I'll just kill this guy and then everything will be cool. This presented a genuine concern for him, because it wasn't just, okay, I kill a guy and then it's over. This meant that the control that he had spent his whole life, you know, kind of building up, and that, you know, the one thing he'd been trying to avoid his whole life, he now has to do. And it puts him in a very difficult position of, is my conscience worth more than the lives of a bunch of people? So what do you guys think? Do you think that in this specific case it was justified? Do you think in every case it's justified? Do you think it's never justified? Let me know in the comments down below. Now, the last topic that I want to cover today is, surprise, surprise, relationships. I feel like all of my videos are just me talking about like relationships between characters in books. I don't know, but human relationships fascinate me. Sue me. So I think in this case, it's particularly interesting to look at relationships because, sure, you know, in a standard book, you expect people to have bonds with other people, but when you have a character like John who you know, kind of struggles to connect with other people and see them as people sometimes, you know, it kind of becomes a lot more subtle, right? You have to go through the book and really explore his emotions to find out whether he is capable even of caring for other people, and whether the things that he feels are genuine. And a lot, you know, this kind of concern, I guess, or this revelation of how genuine his emotions are then comes from the people that he loves being in danger, right? When he's faced with, I can save my conscience and I know who the killer is, but I'm not gonna risk becoming a killer myself by killing one person to save everyone else, that would be, you know, a selfish choice. So his willingness to sacrifice and, you know, kind of endanger himself, and his willingness to give up this control for the sake of other people, I think is really, really telling of who John is as a person. So the first aspect that I want to look at when it comes to John and his relationships is the idea of family. So John has a very complicated family dynamic, and I could go on and on about it because it's a lot, but we're just going to focus on his mom and his dad. So John's dad left them, so John is often kind of having this feeling of obviously missing his dad, but also, you know, struggling to understand why he left. And this also means that his mom is usually trying to overcompensate for his lack of a presence, which oftentimes then makes her kind of a bit overbearing, and it's a little difficult for John to connect with that, right? Because you know, he's feeling all these complicated emotions about not having his dad, but also feeling suffocated by his mom, and they're not very good at communicating with each other, so there's always a lot of tension. So, I mean, I think despite their challenges and really being open and honest with each other, I do think that John's mom's love really shines through in this book. And, you know, she doesn't always make the best choices, and she definitely struggles with his diagnosis, especially because she runs a mortuary, so where, you know, he helps, so she's kind of concerned about, like, well, is it okay for my son to be around death? Did this kind of cause this disorder in him? Like, is this my fault? But I think even when her choices aren't the best, you can always see that she's well-intentioned and she's trying her best, and she genuinely cares about her son. She's never trying to be abusive or hurtful. And I think what's really, really beautiful and really special is that we get to see John's mom kind of going from this person who's really terrified of her son and who he could be, to kind of realizing who he actually is and being able to see the world from his point of view. The next relationship that I want to explore is his relationship with his therapist. So John goes to this therapist, Dr. Neblin, and their relationship again also evolves throughout the book. We see him be a lot more controlled in what he, you know, the information he provides his therapist with in the beginning, and then kind of throughout how he is able to see, you know, this isn't the enemy, this isn't somebody who just wants to like lock me away and call me crazy. This is somebody who wants me to be able to be vulnerable and explore these emotions and talk about them in a safe and controlled environment, and who can genuinely see that, you know, this condition is not who I am. And one thing that I really, really loved was the fact that Dr. Neblin was a good therapist. I think a lot of times in media, you know, TV, books, movies, we see a lot of very incompetent kind of mental health specialists, which is very frustrating, because if somebody's considering getting help and then they see a really, really bad counselor or therapist, they're like, well, I'm not going to go because I'm not going to have that, you know, I don't want to have that experience. So it's really nice to have a good portrayal of, you know, a positive, you know, therapy relationship. Neblin is able to see that despite, you know, John kind of sometimes going on his little weird rants about serial killers, or even being aware probably that he's very much controlled in what he says, Neblin kind of takes, you know, his whole notion and his initiative to have these rules in place as a sign that John really wants to be a good person and that he's really putting in the work. So, you know, Nevlin becomes a person that John really relies on, especially, you know, in his darkest hour. So when his character is in danger, it puts John in a very difficult position. And then the last relationship that I wanted to look at was John's relationship to his friends and love interest. And by friends, I mean the one friend he has, Max. So it's more of a friendship of convenience. John doesn't particularly, at first, seem to care for Max as a person. They're both kind of just like outcasted kids who nobody else wants to be their friend, so they might as well be friends with each other. But as the story progresses, John starts to realize that he does care about this friendship, especially when he feels that he's going to lose it and when there is a threat to to Max's direct kind of family circle. The thought of the grief that his friend is going to go through, and then the thought of losing his friend, I think really shakes something in John, because he realizes that he can care about people and that he can have relationships, and that's not what he believed. And then on the flip side, we have his relationship with Brooke. So Brooke is a girl in his class that, it's super cute. They're very cute, their attractions. Well, the healthy, normal ones. She's a girl in his class. It's very obvious that she is into him and he is into her, but he doesn't really allow himself to get close to her at all because he doesn't want her to get hurt or to, kind of get caught up. And if he does let this monster loose, he doesn't want her to kind of be a victim of that kind of situation. The problem is that instead of being like, hey, well, I'm just not going to talk to her, the second he kind of lets down those rules and that code of conduct, he starts to stalk this girl. So it's so messed up to say that it's kind of like his feelings for her are pure, but it's also obviously super messed up. Like, if you know who the band Masked Intruder is, it's basically like his entire relationship with Brooke is a Masked Intruder song. It's like this hopeless romantic stalker and this girl who's completely oblivious to the fact that he's there all the time. So super creepy, wouldn't recommend, but hopefully in the next few books he kind of is able to deal with that and stop being a stalker and just like her and have a good relationship. But I don't know, we'll see what happens there. I'm Not a Serial Killer is a wonderful book that really explores the complexities of people, of humans. It really shies away from that black and white and allows characters to live in these gray spaces where I think they really flourish. John has dealt with a very rough deck, but instead of just giving up and accepting things or kind of falling into his perceived destiny, he really tries his best to fight this and to find a way to be functional and to be good and caring and to really kind of be able to flourish despite kind of like expectations or stereotypes. So what's it all about? Well, at its core, I'm Not a Serial Killer is a book about finding one's own destiny despite, kind of preconceived notions, finding ways to genuinely connect with people, and just those gray spaces that make us human. As always, thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, make sure to leave a like and let me know down in the comments below what you thought about this book, about the topics that I discussed. If there's anything that you want me to read next, definitely leave that below. Make sure to subscribe for more bookish content like this and hit that notification bell so you know exactly when I upload next. And I will see you guys next time.